Well, good afternoon, Rachel. How are you today?
I'm good. Minus a sick kid. But
Oh
other than
gosh.
that, it's
Yeah.
always
Tis
uh,
the season, right?
it is. It is
Yeah.
unfortunately.
And the kid is home, or yeah.
Yep, he is
Oh,
home. Yeah, fortunate enough to work from home, and so
yeah.
that's helpful.
You can make it work, right? Yeah, I
Yep.
understand. But yeah, it is the season for lots of colds and flus and viruses and crazy weather patterns and all that stuff, right? So best of luck to you getting through that today.
Luckily, they only seem to be 24 hours, so
That's
we'll take
always
it.
good. Yeah, awesome. Well, Rachel, welcome to Rare Awareness Radio. And for folks listening, we are joined today by Rachel Heilmann, who is the president and co-founder of the Rory Bell Foundation. And very excited to learn more about. Yes, look at that. We got the logo we're going. We're very excited to learn more about the Rory Bell Foundation. But before we jump into any of that, Rachel, can you just give us a little thumbnail sketch of you and who you are? And you've got such a neat story. I love the fact that you've got this clinical background and all the crazy stuff you've done.
Yeah, no, happy to.
Yeah.
I think for so many of us in the rare disease space, and especially in the ultra rare disease space,
Yeah.
we always have this sort of prior life,
Right. Your pre-rare disease life,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
pre-diagnosis,
Right.
pre whatever, right? And so my background is actually in clinical pharmacy, and so
How interesting.
I graduated with a PharmD. I did 2 years of residency training, and then I practiced clinically in primary care and endocrinology, and then also in leadership. Managed 15 clinical pharmacy specialists, just like me, in specialty areas. So if you think like all the ologies, like that, those were kind of under my purview, and I did that for really my entire career, almost 15 years, in a really large health, integrated health system, until, my daughter, Rory was born in 2019. And so, that's sort of my crucible moment where my life really changed. And now, I have my post-rare life. And so I've always had the knowledge of rare disease and that it exists, and, up to date on the therapeutics that hit the market, of course, to treat those things.
Right, because of your background as a clinical pharmacist. Yeah.
Exactly. But you don't realize what it entails, until you really
until it hits you. Yeah, absolutely.
Until you're really a caregiver. Mm-hmm.
If you wouldn't mind me asking too, just only because I'm purely curious, Rachel, why endocrinology? How did you end up in that space?
It kind of came with the role.
Yeah.
So it just was part of the transition into leadership. And I had done, and it fit me well too, because I had done a lot of work in endocrinology, just in my primary care role within the same system, especially around like osteoporosis and, getting into diabetes and cholesterol management and sort of all of the things that come along with it. And then once you move into a specialty space, then you really start learning real niche stuff like Cushing's and, pituitary tumor issues and all of those other things. But it just sort of happened that way. And luckily I love the specialty area, and I still use it all the time.
I find endocrinology just personally very fascinating. Like you mentioned, Cushing's and pancreatic and tumors and diabetes. There's just so much there. So it's like very niche specialty, to your point, right? So you mentioned Rory. So in 2019, Rory was born, and you were no longer a pre-rare disease individual. Now you were, Talk a little bit about, when Rory arrived and how soon did you start to realize that there was something not right here?
I think, a lot of parents are thrust very violently into this world. So it's not a choice, right? Nobody chooses to have a kid that requires a lot of care and attention. So she was born during a snow dump here in Denver, Colorado on October 4th.
Gosh. So early season snow. Yeah.
It was. Yeah. I walked into the delivery room in a tank top, and I went back in a puffy jacket. So, Yeah, she came early. So
How early was she?
She was just over 3 weeks.
Okay.
So
Yep.
not quite
Quite
preemie,
preemie, but on the cusp. Yep.
on the cusp,
Yeah.
but she was just so intent of
Like, I'm coming.
living,
Yeah.
on living her life. Yep. And when she was born, she was very small. She was only 5 pounds 1 ounce.
Oh, girl. Yeah.
And she was microcephalic, or had a very small head, which initially for me wasn't alarming, because I also have a small head.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And
So you're like, oh, she's just genetically taking after me. Yeah.
right. And my brother also has a small head, right?
There you go. Yep.
And so I was kind of like, well, we'll see how this,
Sure.
turns out. And she actually ended up that very first night after she was born. She was kind of making noises in her, her little bassinet that they keep next to there. And I went and I turned on the light, and it was like 4 a.m, and she was turning blue.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Right in front of you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And she was choking. And so I called the nurse button. I turned her over and kind of like patted her back. And she vomited up. And so that was, I think, the first insight to like, there's something scary going on here.
As a mother, and your maternal instinct is like off the chart at this point, I'm sure, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, she was put in the NICU, she had some blood sugar issues, which is not uncommon at altitude with small babies.
Okay. Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And then, but she continued to vomit. And so, we went home eventually after, about a week or so in the NICU, and then the vomiting just kept continuing.
Kept coming. Yeah.
And so I think, deep down, I knew something
more
was going on. Of course, I wanted to hold out hope, right? That
of course,
she would start gaining weight, and it would just.
This is something she's going to grow out of, or something.
Exactly. And so, it went on for, her 3 months, her first, 3 months of life. And she didn't gain very much weight. She only gained a couple pounds.
Oh, like everything goes in is going out, right?
It's exactly coming out. Yep. She wasn't sleeping because she wasn't eating, and she was throwing up all the time. And so eventually.
And you're not sleeping. Yeah.
So eventually she got hospitalized for failure to thrive. And a lot of that was to help with that, but also to start the genetic workup.
So you start the odyssey,
difficult,
as we call it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Because it's just so difficult to get into genetic testing. And so now that we're beginning of 2020. So I think we all know what happened.
Yeah. So let's just throw another, complication on top of this. Yeah.
Yes. And so fortunately, she actually started her seizing there in the hospital that first night. And so that was her first seizure, and I recognized it, and I was getting her ready for bed, talking to one of the young nurses who had come in, and she started seizing. And I said, this is strange. And I said, I think she's having a seizure.
Something we haven't seen before. Yeah.
And the nurse kind of looked at me, and I was like, no, I'm almost positive. Look, she's like not responding to me. She's like, right. It's very rhythmic. It's one-sided, and again, like, I think part of that is because I have a healthcare background.
Sure.
Like, in my head, like things are like clicking.
Yeah.
Yes. And so she said, should I call the team? I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that first seizure
started.
lasted probably just over 5 minutes.
Oh my gosh, it's like an eternity. Yeah,
it's an eternity. It's an eternity when it's the first time. And again, fortunate to be in a hospital and have a team.
Even still,
still. So we spent 16 days in the hospital. We came out with an NG tube. A whole bunch of negative genetic tests.
Is she under a month old at this time still too?
She's just over 3 months.
Okay. So she's okay. So she's a little older, but not really much.
No. She's teeny tiny, right?
Right.
And not hitting miles. And you can't put her on her belly because she's puking all the time. Like,
right. All these things that, at a 3-month-old child. So you come home with an NG tube.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then COVID started.
Right. So now you're isolated on top of all of this.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
really was a blessing.
Okay.
Because
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, it was a blessing for me because I got to move home, right?
Yeah.
And so before, even though I was largely managerial, right, and didn't have a lot of direct patient care at that moment in time in my career, I was at home, and so
That's
it
good.
really,
Yeah.
and it really allowed me to be able to try to balance both sides of my
of this, full-time caregiver mom, plus you're working in a, like, not a, like you said, in a managerial
yes.
So people are looking to you to be like, hey boss, how do we do this, how do we do that?
Yes. And so I was still doing both of those things, and trying to uncover the mystery along with her physicians at Children's Hospital here, and and try to get her seizures under control, and just all of the things that kind of come with a really, really sick kid. And so, we went through all the hoops like everybody else does to get whole exome sequencing, and of course, trying to figure out like how you schlep her brother, who was 5 and at home at the time, and then her dad and me and like all of us going in.
This is a whole process. Not just you and the little baby.
It's a whole process.
And we're in isolation because of COVID, and
so we all have to get to the lab, and we all have to get tested, and then you wait because the labs are all backed up rightfully so from at that time a universal pandemic. And so we were lucky in some respects because she was diagnosed at 8 months. But a lot of that had to do with like how critically ill she was.
And can you talk a little bit about her diagnosis, Rachel?
So we got hospitalized again. And I was sitting there in the hospital on July 3rd. And her liver at that point had started to fail. And so you could actually see the outline of her liver.
Wow.
And it was touching her hip. It was so big. And
wow.
And her geneticist that was on call that weekend came in and said I was able to get the lab results from GeneDx. They did fax them over, to me. And so at this point, it had been almost 4 months that we were waiting. And he said, she has something called NARS1.
And you're like, what the heck is that?
Like every parent. And it looks like it was inherited from you and her father. So
Is it a recessive, Rachel? Is that how
it's actually both.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And it is interesting. This is the NARS, the N actually stands for asparagine, which is a critical amino acid that we all use in our bodies from the moment of development till the moment we die. And it's part of a cluster of the other genes that also put different amino acids on to form those functional proteins. And so in this cluster of genes, NARS1 is really one of the few that has sort of this recessive, or you inherit one from each parent, and also what we call de novo or spontaneous.
Okay. Yep.
And so it's kind of unique that way in that sort of cluster of genes. And it just goes to show how critical asparagine is for sort of daily life and function. And so, but at the time there was nothing, You Googled NARS1 and you got a French makeup company, So there's like no publications,
Nobody's doing any research on this.
Not that we know of,
Right. At that time.
And even, and even our geneticist, and I will give him credit for this, compared to some of the other stories you hear, is, he said, hey, I outreached into my network. I did find one researcher who's working on this, and did kind of say like, we think there's around 30 individuals in the world.
Oh my god, so ultra rare.
So Rory, like by all accounts, was number 31
wow.
on the list.
Ultra rare when you think about you know, I don't even know what the world's population is now. 7 billion, 8, I don't know.
Almost 8, almost 8
billion. Yeah.
yeah. And so I think at that point, and he said, you know, and he was very frank and just said, you know, she probably won't recover from her liver failure because she probably doesn't have the capacity to do so.
Right.
And
right. I imagine it must have been tremendously challenging for him to deliver that, but maybe that's how he felt was the only way it could be delivered, right? Yeah.
Yep. And for me, like that moment, which again, you're in a hospital, you're really not you're not supposed to really leave, or you have to have a mask, right? It's you know, you can't have another parent in the room with you.
Right. So your husband wasn't there. Yeah.
Yep. You can't bring kids in. Like it's, you know, it's
you're
very,
completely
very
isolated. Yeah.
Yes. Very, very, very isolated from everything. And and I think, you know, I mean, she received a death sentence, and and then it was like, how do I get home, right? Because if she's going to die, like I'm not
going to be here.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And of course, you don't know, right, how long that's going to go. And I think that's just it. She had flashes then for the remaining parts of her life where she really was alive, and
you could see her.
Yes, you could see her, but her, you know, we had to put her on so many drugs to help with spasms and fluid from the liver failure and seizures and just all of those things so that she could have some quality of life and not be in pain. And so that was the turning point. And she passed away in February of 2021.
Right.
So that you know, that changes your life forever.
I can't even fathom. But I've heard, you know, I've talked with other rare disease parents like you, and they say, you know, through it all, we still saw our child buried beneath all of, you know, all of this. And the one thing that I stand in awe of is, you know, of course, tremendously sorry for the loss of Rory. And it sounds like you had a very short time with her, but a very beautiful time with her. But you could have at that point, Rachel said, okay, well, you know, I was dealt this terrible thing, and you could have just wallowed in that, but you didn't. You started the Rory Bell Foundation, and that, I mean, to me is amazing, because again, you could have just wallowed in that, but you're like, nah, I'm not gonna accept that, right? So talk to us a little bit about Rory's foundation.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, and what I've learned in my grief journey, which regardless of if your child passes away from this disorder or struggles every day to live, it's grief, right? We all share a common thread of grief, and and more in a life that our children will never have. And I think throughout all of it, I did still consider myself very lucky, because I had the education and the background and the knowledge of the healthcare system.
What an unselfish way to look at this, Rachel. I mean, that's such a big way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I also wondered, like, what do people do
who don't?
Who don't, right? Who don't know how to advocate, or don't know how to ask the questions, or don't know,
or had your clinical training so you could understand this physician is talking to you and you understand what he or she is saying. Other people don't.
And honestly, like, I understood about this much,
but even still, this much is, most people understand. You know?
Yes. And I knew I had the capacity to learn, right? And I think through all of that, right, and through the inspiration of Rory, like that girl wanted to fight, right? She wanted to live, and she fought so hard to do that. And I think when you are in the middle of your grief, right, you have a choice to be swallowed up, right, by the wave.
You could say, well, nobody helped me, so I'm not going to help anybody.
Right? Exactly. Or you find the surfboard and the gratitude, and then you hit the wave, and
I love what you just said there. Yeah, that's
and
yeah.
you move forward for something that's, you know, bigger than you, and bigger than your daughter, right? And in the hopes that other people don't have to do it, right?
Yeah, unbelievable.
And so that was the impetus behind that. And at that point, I had outreached. There were 2 publications that came out in August of 2020, so really not long after her diagnosis, and I had outreached both the authors. Again, like, I knew how to read literature, right? I knew what a corresponding author was like.
She was diagnosed on July 3rd, right? So now this is August, so just a month later, right?
Yep. And so I had read the papers, you know, many times, because they're very, like, scientific, and I outreached the authors, and I didn't hear anything back, unfortunately. And then when she had passed away, I tried again, and I did receive some messages back. And so I had connected with Stephanie FMU, who was part of the team that actually discovered NARS1 as causing disease. And so
where are they located? What part?
University of College London.
Oh, okay.
So out in London. And so that was, you know, early spring. I took 6 months off from my job, and spent some time traveling with my family, and because the world was just starting to open up, and
open a little bit,
and trying to carry her memory and journey, and thinking about what am I going to do next, right? And so by that fall, Stephanie and I had started a Facebook group. We had started meeting other families. You know, we were off and running, and then I met Terry DeClerc,
your co-founder.
My co-founder. And so she was probably one of the second or third families into our Facebook group, and you know, and from the US. And so that was in early 2022, and end of 21, and by July we had filed for a nonprofit. So
fast.
So exactly 2 years after Rory was diagnosed, we launched the Rory Bell Foundation on July 3rd, 2022, with Terry. And Terry has a son, Grady, who also is an inherited case from him and his parents. And so and I was still off from work, and I actually I wasn't at that point. I had decided
had you gone back to work? Yeah.
I went back to work in August of 2021. And then I actually quit I quit my job in July of 22. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it anymore. I
understand.
I needed a change, and to be away from everything that had happened.
Right.
And so we launched in July 2022. I was struggling to also find a job. And I met Terry Jo Bichelle and Anna Fauser at Combined Brain. And really just to talk about the Rory Bell Foundation and what their organization does, and how we sort of fit in with them, and sort of support as a fledgling
nonprofit.
And Terry Jo was like, "Hey, you kind of know what you're talking about. What's your background, and
what's your deal?" And
I said, "Well, I'm a PharmD by training, but you know, I'm jobless." And she said, "Send me your CV." And I said, "Okay." And so she was like the only one who offered me a job. And so I did a neuroscience research fellowship with Combined Brain for a year, and met the Med13L Foundation, and did work for them for a strategic research plan. And so now I work full time in the rare disease space. I run Rory Bell on nights and weekends with Terry and our awesome crew over there, and families. And I live rare now. I live it with all of these parents. And
I mean, it's so interesting to me, Rachel, because, you know, what you just said very succinctly there, you know, you live rare disease, because you are spending all of your professional time in the role that you have, and running the Rory Bell Foundation at the same time, or co-running the Rory Bell Foundation at the same time. Can you just talk for just a couple more seconds, Rachel, about what you're doing with your day job
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just also add, like, people have found out that I'm a pharmacist.
Right.
So now I have like 1,000 day jobs, all of which are, very much voluntary.
Yeah. Yeah. People who
Because
want your counsel. Yeah.
yes, because
Yeah.
there's so few of us in
Right.
this space,
Right.
especially with a clinical background
Right.
and, like,
Right.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, the year I spent with Combined Brain, I had a lot of background information, but man, crash coursing neuroscience is not for the lighthearted. um, and now, I think being older, or perhaps the better term is more experienced, as we
wiser.
That's right, as we like to say, and having that leadership background has allowed me to also step into a role to run, a couple of organizations, and so
outstanding.
And so I help run the Med 13. Well, I drive the Med 13L Foundation's research and community engagement. And so really, it's putting the things in place, the resources, the tools in place, to get them to clinical trials, right? To be preclinical trial ready, which obviously, runs down to Rory Bell Foundation. It runs down to having conversations with other organizations who are parents that don't have any kind of background in science or healthcare or drug development or things that, for me, I've been exposed to for, my entire career. And so, and so, yeah, it certainly has catapulted Rory Bell Foundation. I think I think it has helped Med 13L Foundation. I think
I'm sure it's reciprocal.
I'm sure they would echo that.
Yeah. I can't imagine it's not reciprocal. Yeah.
Yeah, and other organizations, and it's really been so valuable to me personally to create a network and a community of people that are so deeply impacted by by whatever genetic condition.
I'll say you have this common thing that binds you together, right?
Yes.
As unfortunate as it is, but
it is.
You're building this beautiful community. Can you just tell me a little bit, Rachel, about the kind of, it may seem obvious, people, about what the mission of the Rory Bell Foundation is, but can you kind of surmise that for us?
Yeah. Like most of it, it's ultimately to find a cure, right? But, we like to say at the Rory Bell Foundation that we're bringing joy today and hope for tomorrow.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And so the thing about, kids that are impacted by NARS1, and even in glimpses and flashes that I saw with Rory, is they are very happy, smiley, just have a lust for life. And it reminds you sometimes, like, how simple joy can be.
If we allow it to be, right? Yeah.
If we allow it to be, and if we kind of put aside the noise, right? That's around us and behind us, that's really what life should be about, right? It should be about your joy. It should be about your happiness. And that even in the midst of their inabilities, right? To walk, to eat.
These basic things. Yeah.
That you learn and that you think are ordained to you.
Well, and then once you learn them, you totally take them for granted, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And you say ordination is a great way to put that. Yeah.
Yes. And that, but yet somehow these children are able to find, the light in the world without being able to do those things, or to do those things with a great amount of obstacles and barriers and discomfort. And so I think it's, the hope for tomorrow is, like, those things get easier for them because we're able to find those.
Yeah, you're doing some big work right now.
Therapeutics.
Yeah.
But for today, it's like to make sure that we're capturing, right?
Understood. Yeah. And what are some of the big initiatives that Rory Bell is focused on right now, Rachel?
Yeah. So first thing, we were just awarded the CZI grant.
What's that mean?
Chan Zuckerberg Initiative Grant. And so,
oh yes, wow, that's amazing.
Yes, those are names we all should recognize.
Everybody knows those names. Yeah.
Yeah. But this was their third cycle as Rare as One, which is really just to try to build sustainability and capacity for rare disease organizations. And so,
Outstanding.
we got really lucky to be a part of this group that's going in. And so, we're really focused on making sure that the Rory Bell Foundation is around for as long as it needs to be.
Yeah,
right,
sustainability,
around.
right? Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Because we're all doing this as side jobs, right? We all have full-time jobs, right?
And kids and everything else.
Kids
yeah.
and yes. Yeah. And so to really make that work, make us sustainable and aware, and we're so excited and grateful for that opportunity. And, Terry and I, and then one of my really close friends, Kit, have really spent the last 2 years building up our researchers and knowledge base by attending meetings that really we have no business attending.
But we're showing up anyways.
We're showing up anyways. We submit abstracts. We do 15-minute spiels. We talk about our lives, right? As raising rare disease kids, right? We do posters because we've, I think, again, I did qualitative research in my background. Kit did qualitative research. So we know what we have to do. And so, we go to these big scientific meetings and start building research team up for people who maybe weren't interested in NARS1 until we came and shared.
Yeah, and you somehow opened up a channel for them or turned on a light they didn't realize.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's really been, we went from one researcher, right, in the entire world to 10.
Wow.
In 2 years.
I was gonna say in a pretty short amount of time. Yeah.
Yes. And they're all doing different sorts of things, right? We have a researcher looking at yeast and NARS1 and yeast and drug rescue, and we have cell studies, and we have mice, that we're trying to.
You're trying to cover the gamut. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so we've been able, and these guys know each other already because it's such a small network. And
right. Well, and you facilitated that.
Yeah. So and that's what, right, I feel like our role has been is sort of facilitating the experts, right? The people who really are at the bench every day, right? Nice. To be able to do the work that they need to do and answer the questions that we also want answered to help us bring therapeutics, right, directly to our kids, right? And obviously all of that, right, comes back to me that I translate into Med13L, or like I work with CTNB1 as part of their scientific advisory board, or, small groups that are very much like mine, right? Like I think you've had Jill Hawkins on here. Or
we have had Jill.
Yeah. So
it's all interconnected, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And genetically, right, or biologically, NARS1 isn't connected to any of these groups, right?
Right. Right. You're not connected in a like you say, in a physiological standpoint.
Correct. But what we share is far greater. And
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's kind of the full circle is and just, it is, there's a lot of hard work that goes on in rare, right? Yeah. And very overlooked, and and there's not enough money or funding or eyes, on the space, and kids are dying, right? I mean, my daughter died.
Yeah.
And the greater the swell of voices, right?
Right.
The greater chances there are of somebody noticing.
Or something, right? Awareness is what we're getting to at the end of the day here, right?
Yeah. Awareness and I mean, did I ever think I'd be thinking about developing a genetic therapy for an ultra rare disease that affects less than 100 people in the world? Yeah. Absolutely not.
Right. Probably the furthest thing from your mind. Yeah.
Yep. Right. But here I am, and I think you will never meet a more passionate, entrepreneurial, grittier community of mostly moms and some, pretty cool dads.
Yeah.
to really get the job done.
Well, and that's the one thing that even in my very brief journey here of learning this space, and I'm very much in learning mode, right? I have seen that observation over and over again. Like you just said it so eloquently again, Rachel, around this gritty, like there's nobody doing it. So like we're not going to accept that status quo and just say, well, maybe someday somebody will be, nope, not acceptable. Like we're going to jump in here and roll up our sleeves and, start breaking down giant rocks into smaller rocks. And like, that's, to me, that's the most impressive thing about all of this. And the fuel and the drive and the passion that goes along with that. Yeah.
And you already stated this. And I think, for me, I say this a lot, right, to families and individuals who have kids that are directly impacted by the disease. Like, I don't have skin in this game anymore. Right. My child has already succumbed to this. Right. And so I think I do bring a sense of clarity, right? I'm not going to be biased or clouded or some of the other things that can happen.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
When you're just so close to the problem.
Right.
And I can take a step back and take a larger view. I think because of that. And it doesn't mean, right, that I don't wake up every morning and not think about my daughter.
This, of course. I mean, like you say, you don't have skin in this, but at the same time, you still have her legacy. You still have her.
Yeah. And she has
her memory.
Lived far longer, which is chronologically true, but also just the magnitude. Through this than she ever did, right? In the vacuum that was COVID and her short 17-month life.
17-month life. Yeah. Unbelievable.
So
And Rachel, as you continue on, you mentioned the Chan Zuckerberg grant, which is an amazing accomplishment and so much more that the Rory Bell Foundation, I'm sure, wants to do, and the work that you're doing in your other capacities. How do you envision, kind of keeping this going? Is it because pure grit and grind is wonderful, but where's the, is it just continuing to build this community? And
it is. NARS1 is a very, very small community. I mean, right. I mean, we are worldwide. But like I said, we're definitely less than 100 individuals worldwide that are affected by it. But it's building the community of NARS1, families that are affected, but exposing them also to other groups, just like I've been exposed to, and to recognize like you're really not alone, right? Like there are people out there fighting the same battles that you're fighting.
You found your co-founder, your scientific advisory board, your, absolutely.
Yeah. It's all there. And if you're willing to look for it, it's going to be there. And I think, like I said, the Rory Bell Foundation will exist for as long as it needs to exist. Right. But the enduring matter is that rare isn't rare, right? That we are a massive community of families that are directly impacted by something that nobody wanted to be impacted by, and you don't choose this path, and you don't choose trauma and grief, but it is what you choose to do.
I say you choose your response to it, right? And I appreciate what you just said about how rare is not so rare, because even though you're connected with these folks now where there isn't a physiological or a biological connection between the syndromes, but there is this bigger connection between it now, right? Between you all. And of course we all know that the more united we are, the more effective we are.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I think that's, one thing Combined Brain is based on, right? Like I didn't start this on my own, right? I learned this from Amber Freed, who runs SLC 6A1, right? Like every single one of us stand on giants before us until, we now are the giant. And that I think is really what we want, right? As a community.
That's amazing. Well,
And just because you don't want to answer the question, right, doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? I think.
That's a very good point. Yeah. If you don't want it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So ignoring it doesn't make the problem go away.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
It just makes us angrier as moms.
And everyone knows, there's the last thing you want is an angry mom.
Right? The last thing you want is an angry mom. That's right.
My mother always used to say, when mom's not happy, no one's happy. Right?
That's exactly right. Yep. So yeah, I think that's what we're starting to see, kind of in this movement and moment. Of just advocacy and man, it's amazing. It really is amazing and inspiring, regardless of my story and my background. There's there's tens of thousands of Rachels out there.
Right.
Only one Rory Bell, but yeah,
that's okay. Yeah. I can't thank you enough for. I'm going to go back to the metaphor you used a few minutes ago for grabbing that surfboard and riding that wave, Rachel. Thank God you did. And thank God that you're continuing the work that you're doing. We have been speaking with Rachel Heilmann from the Rory Bell Foundation. Thank you for honoring your daughter's legacy and continuing on with everything that you're doing with the Rory Bell Foundation. And best of luck with the grant. Best of luck with everything that you're doing. Collective Brain, you're such a busy woman. I can't imagine how you fit it all in. Did you figure out a 25-hour day, or how did you pull it off? I mean,
I think I live a 25-hour day. I'm not really sure yet. For some reason, my clock stopped working.
Probably for your own good.
Yes. No, I really appreciate the time and the opportunity, Richard, and also for what you're bringing to our little voices to make one big united one.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're just trying to take our lead from you folks, but we appreciate that. And I don't want to go away before I say to folks that they can find you at rorybellfoundation.org. That's correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
We're in the middle of a website overhaul, so
that's okay, as long as they can still find their way to rorybellfoundation.org.
Yes.
And Rachel Heilmann, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Richard.